Big 12 football is back. It's Big 12 Media Day season, talking season, breaking it all down right here on the Cougar Tracks Podcast. And I'm your BYU insider, Mitch Harper, here on KSLSports.com. You can follow me on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, at Mitch_Harper. Follow KSL Sports as well on all the socials, at KSL Sports. And download the KSL Sports app today so you can get push notifications, updates on BYU sports. Wherever you are, you can always get updates. And also, you can listen and watch this podcast on KSL Sports YouTube and on the KSL Sports app and wherever you get your podcast. So, going to be diving into the big storylines for BYU football and the Big 12 at large here in this edition of the show. Also, College Football 26, BYU's quarterback situation, and recruiting as well. And that's where we start things off as today, just moments ago. BYU football lands a pair of defensive personnel to the class of 2026. They add three-star edge rusher from Rogers, Arkansas, Braxton Lindsey. And then moments later, Nehemiah Kolone from Stillwater, Oklahoma, defensive lineman. He commits to BYU as well. BYU now up to 18 commitments in the class of 2026, and this class continues to knock on the door of being potentially a top 25 class. And then you think about guys that are still out there for BYU potentially, like a Jax Tanner, who is going to make his decision coming up on July 12th. BYU is in a great position for many players, and getting Kolone and Lindsey, I think, were really good additions. Braxton Lindsey in particular had a great list of offers, primarily from SEC programs, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, the hometown team, and then the Miami Hurricanes among the notables. He throws away the Oklahoma hat in favor of a BYU Noggin Boss hat, which was pretty cool. Again, we're living in a world where BYU's winning hat ceremonies, folks. This is a completely different climate than the BYU you used to know. But Braxton Lindsey is a fascinating prospect, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a really dynamite player, excellent athlete, dual sport guy. I just love the position. You know, he could be like a Jack Kelly type of player where you could put him at the edge, a defensive end, if you needed to, add some weight to his frame. But, man, he could be an excellent outside linebacker as well. I think he's going to be a fantastic player for BYU. When you think about how the guy could play wide receiver, he's not going to play wide receiver in college, but at high school, he was asked to play on the offensive side. He's putting up monster numbers as a wide receiver. And then you see what he was doing, the impact on defense, 9 sacks last season. Dual sport guy, plays basketball as well. I think this is an excellent addition. And to go into the state of Arkansas, where it's a long ways from home, and I know that in this climate, the location of where a player isn't as significant as, say, 20, 30 years ago. It was almost unthinkable to get a guy from the Central or Eastern time zones to play at BYU back in the day. It would happen. It wasn't never happening, but it wasn't commonplace. And the world's gotten smaller, it feels like, because of social media, and everyone can connect with each other on a moment's notice. But still, long ways from home, and the list of suitors, and BYU gets him. Again, it's a new world for BYU football, and still they're outside the top 25 in this recruiting class, number 27 as of today in the 24/7 Sports Composite. But BYU is doing some great things on the recruiting trail, and I think one of the underrated pieces to the success on the recruiting trail right now for the Cougars, the significance of recruiting informing preseason thoughts, rankings going into a year. Now, look, you let it play out on the field. We know that. I understand. But as we've seen, and you're going to see it here this week, the Big 12 sometimes gets overlooked. And it's been a league last year, Arizona State, BYU, they were kind of overlooked because, well, they didn't have the team getting off the bus that had all the recruiting ranking, the glamour that warranted, the preseason hype. the lofty expectations. They exceeded everyone's expectations. I understand that. But when you have heralded recruiting classes that are top 25 and you do that multiple years and then in a 4-year window, you're going to be a team, even if you haven't been winning at the highest clip with recruiting rankings, with continuity of 8, 9 wins each year, maybe 10 if you can become that sort of program. Every year it'll be plug and play. You're just in the preseason top 20 of the ESPN FPI or the advanced metrics. So then going into a year, the perception is already on your side. And look, I hope we get to a world where college football is not like that anymore, where hopefully it's just a clean slate every single year, especially in the transfer portal era where it's just harder to forecast year after year. But these recruiting rankings, people can say it's not that big of a deal, but it is a big deal. And I understand that these guys still got to perform. BYU's had some talented recruiting classes in the past, and many of which didn't amount to much. And some of their quote-unquote bad recruiting classes, like 2018, produced a number 2 overall pick and had some really talented football players. So it's an inexact science, but I do believe the recruiting rankings are getting closer to, being really spot on. And these are all going to be players that when they matriculate onto campus, whenever they do, they're going to be players that are looked upon to compete right away. And I think that's a different barometer, too, for how BYU has evolved in the Big 12. When they were an independent program early in Kolone's tenure, they swung big early on when he first took the job in 2016. But it was still a developmental program. And look, there's still going to be development involved. The Braxton Lindsey, Nehemiah Kolone, 3-star prospects. You got to develop them and maximize their abilities. But you're getting guys that step onto campus and you think they can compete rather than, okay, let's get them on campus. Let's add 50 pounds to their frame if they're a lineman and turn them into something. That's what BYU was doing a lot of in Independence. Now they're getting athletes who have the physical makeup that if they showed up in January, they're ready to compete and battle for time or at least push the current players in the program to earn their spots. And that's what you want. That's the competitive depth that you want. And I think that's a sign to me of what this recruiting class is. Look, you'll go through the class. They got 18 commits right now. Probably 9 of them aren't going to do much. But if they give you competitive depth, that's great. Like, you're not going to have every class or an entire class just everyone hits. It'd be amazing if they did. And I think you got to be closer to that now in the revenue sharing era where you have to vet everyone as close as possible, and you need to play a little bit of money ball, and you need to figure out what positions you're going to prioritize. And clearly, edge rushers and linemen are a huge priority for BYU, and that's a smart move because defensive ends in the NFL, that is a premium position. And a guy like Braxton Lindsey, who could be an outside linebacker, edge rusher, however they develop him at BYU, he could be that guy. And Kolone is a lineman who was highly productive the past couple seasons at Stillwater, Oklahoma. So this is a really good recruiting class, and they still got some bigger fish out there to continue to potentially add and make this a top 25 recruiting class. But